So we're just starting on our fretboard here, and this is a piece of rosewood. This is a fretboard blank we bought from Mahogany Green in Irish Luthier Supply Shop, and it's pretty much square and pretty much flat on all sides, so it's a great base to start with anyway. And we're just using our Crimson Guitars fret ruler here, and you can see it's got marks for where nut, first fret all the way down, and this is going to be a Gibson scale length. So you can see we've got our 24 3/4 scale mark here. So we can just line that up with our centre line here that we've just drawn on, and we just put a mark of where each of our frets are going to be, and with that mark we can then take a protractor. This is an aircraft grade one, and we can just use that to mark our fret lines out completely square and accurate, and we can get ready to start to cut them out then. So what we're going to do is we're going to start marking out our frets and our nut slot, and this is a mechanical pencil, so the dots probably won't show up at all on our camera here, but we'll be able to see them here and we can use them for our reference. So we're just marking our nut to begin with, our first fret, second, and so on. And now that we've got those marks, as we said, we can take our protractor here, and starting with our nut line, we can make sure we're bang on that centre line using our protractor, and then we can mark exactly where our nut is going to be. So we've got our first mark there, so that's going to be our nut line. So we can measure then as well for what thickness of nut we're going to use, and then we can move on and start to mark our first fret. Again, just lining up the protractor exactly on 0 degrees. And that's going to be where our first fret is going to go. And also with our fret ruler here, we've got all our markings of where our dot positions need to be, so we can use them for reference as well. So you can just give them a mark, and we'll just go along and we'll mark out the entire fretboard, and we'll bring you back when all that's been done. Okay, so we've got all our fret positions marked out now. If you can just make them out there on this rosewood board. They just get fainter as we move out of the light. But what we're going to do now is we're going to cut them out. Now there's loads of different ways of doing this. People have jigs for table saws and everything else, radial arm saws, everything. But we're just using a basic, good old fashioned gentleman saw. And we're just going to cut these by hand. Just make sure we're lined up nice and even. And just going to get all of them started. And then we'll come back and we'll make sure we cut them down to the correct depth then. So we're just going to press on with that, taking things nice and handy and making sure everything's nice and square. So we're just using a scalpel blade here, and we're just using that to score the line, just to make a little impression on the surface. And this rosewood is extremely tough, so it takes quite a few strokes. And then with that little impression on the surface, that gives something for the teeth of the saw to grab onto. So that just helps us get things started. And then we just take things nice and gentle, making sure we're right on the line. And then just slowly we're going backwards and forwards to make sure, and coming back and checking, making sure we're right on the line, and we are. So we've got all our fret slots cut, and we've gone down pretty much to depth, but when we radius the board we'll lose some of the depth, so we'll come back and recut those after we radius the board. But with that done, what we can move on to next is we can work on our fretboard inlays. So our fretboard inlays, we're going to be doing some dot inlays, and rather than using black or white plastic or something like that, we're going to be using some brass rod. So we're going to be cutting off some small sections. We'll be drilling air holes for all of them and sticking those small sections in. We're just going to be using a 2-part epoxy for that, and then we'll smooth them down with the surface. We're going to put them nice and deep as well, because we still haven't radiused the board yet, so we want to make sure they're nice and deep so we don't lose any material either side. And we've just done a quick test with some scrap here, and you can see it's come out pretty nice. We'll be doing something similar as well with the side dots as well. So we'll get cracking now, and so the first thing we're going to do is remark our positions for these fret markers, and then we'll drill down. So that's all of our holes drilled now. So we're just going to very quickly take our brass rod and we're just going to cut off 10 small little sections to get ready to go in. So we've got all our dots cut out and ready to go, and we've just given them a quick file to take some of the burrs off. So what we're going to do is now we're going to mix up some epoxy very quickly, and then we'll just fill in all the holes with a little drop of it, and then just put in each piece, and we'll leave them there then to dry overnight. So that's all our dots put in. You can see how proud they are of the surface. So we'll leave them to dry overnight to ensure the epoxy is completely rock solid, and then we'll come back and we'll file everything down nice and smooth. So we've just finished off grinding down our fret markers. They're pretty much flush with the surface and that, but because, as we said, we still have to radius the board, we're not worried about getting them exactly perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out the profile of the fretboard, and we'll just get our template back on and we'll cut that down. So we've just used our template here, and we've just marked some white lines to give us a rough outline of what size the fretboard should be. So we're going to take this over to the bandsaw now and take away the bulk of the material there. Then we'll reattach our template and we'll just use the router to get it absolutely perfect and smoothly along the lines. So we're just going to radius our fretboard now, and we've just got two pieces of wood here that are parallel to each other. We've got a centre line marked on our radius block and our centre line on our fretboard, and so our radius block will just run up and down here, and we've got a piece of 80 grit on it at the moment, so it will really hopefully cut through it nice and quickly. So we'll just keep working away at that until we get the desired radius we want, which is a 12-inch radius. So just to give you some progress here, you can see we're taking material off the sides, but we haven't touched the middle yet. So you can just see our curve on our radius block here is starting to match the curve on our fretboard. And if I sound out of breath, that's because I am, because this is knackering. So you can see down here there's material coming off the sides, but we haven't quite touched the middle yet. So we'll just keep going until we have the radius completely sanded in. And so now we've got our radius done with our 80 grit paper. We have the shape we want. We're going to come back with some 120 grit paper just to smooth the whole thing out, and then again with a couple of higher grits as well, just to get it perfectly smooth as well. So now that we've got all our radiusing done and we've sanded it up to a nice high grit, after doing that you can see that we've lost a lot of depth in our fret slots, and in some cases we've nearly lost them completely. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to come back and we're going to recut all our fret slots and cut them to the exact depth that we want now. So we're moving on to binding our fretboard now, and just to show you what we're doing, we've got our piece of binding here, and we've got it pressed up against this block of wood here, which is screwed in place, and we've got our other piece of binding here that's just sprung out. And so basically we're going to press the whole thing together, make sure everything fits nice and snugly and flush, get this all nicely tightly clamped together and clamped down as well, and then we're going to run some acetone in along our gap here, just to get everything to stick, and we can leave that then overnight to dry. So press on ahead now, we'll get this all pressed down in and then clamped in place. So we've just taken the clamps off our little jig here, and we've got our fretboard nicely bound now, so it's all nice and tight and held in pretty good. So what we're going to do now is we'll just chop off the ends here, and we'll get our end piece glued in, and then we'll just trim down these high ridges here and just get it all to the same radius that the fretboard is. So now we've got our binding all scraped down nice and flush. We've just got our fret marker ruler out again, and we're just going to use this to mark where our side dots are going to go. So we're just making a small mark on each of them. So just like we did with the dot markers on the front, we're just putting some glue in to the hole we've drilled here, and then we're just taking a very teeny tiny little piece of our brass bar and just pushing it in. So that's our side dots pretty much done, just in need of a bit of a clean up, as is the rest of the fretboard, just a quick clean, but that's pretty much the fretboard done. We've got it radiused, we've got it bound, we've got our fret markers on the front, and we've got our side dots. So the next thing we're going to do after we clean it up is we're going to fret it.